Hello, and welcome to the Fear Channel, a channel with regular broadcasts telling the most chilling of urban legends, ghost stories, and forays into the darkest corners of the human mind. Those faint of heart or prone to night terrors should proceed at their own risk. Tonight's story is the Three Fingers Lake incident.
When I was 16, I went on a camping trip to the Colorado River near Blythe. We didn't use the government campsite. We decided to camp out back in the Three Fingers Lake area, which is just a series of backwaters and canals. So we arrived there mid-afternoon. It was mid-September and the sun was blazing. We found a spot that was a bit secluded. So we got the tent set up. My brother and I proceeded to go out in search of wood from the nearby willow trees. While collecting wood, I came across a series of hoof prints in the mud, as well as marks of something either sleeping there or at least bedding down in the spot from time to time. I made the assumption that it was a deer or something similar. I had seen things along the river on other trips. We got a small fire going while we had light, set out a few fishing poles to try our luck while my uncle started up dinner. It was while dinner was cooking that I thought I heard something go into the far side of the canal farther downstream and come back out on our side. This was something big. I turned to my brother. He didn't think anything of it. My dad thought it was a beaver. Dinner was cooked, we ate, and then set out to get some night fishing in. All four of us, my dad, brother, and uncle, were focused intently upon our rods. I kept having a strange feeling that we were being watched by someone. My uncle kept telling me I'm just creeping myself out. Around midnight, we all decided to retire. We threw a few more logs onto the fire to keep some coals going, and then climbed into our tents. I decided to sleep in my own tent since I had one. My dad had set up his giant 6-man tent, so the three of them shared it. I had set my tent up on a nice flat and sandy section of dirt. No rocks under me. I had a foam padding and 2 sleeping bags under me, so I was very comfy. As I started to drift off to sleep, I heard something crossing the canal again. Everyone else was passed out. I could hear them snoring loudly. Already wary, I flipped onto my stomach and looked out into the dark through the little mesh opening in the tent. All I could see was some dark shape emerge from the slope of the bank. It wandered on the edge of the light. I could hear it sniffing around. The sound of hooves on the ground made me think deer, but then its shape came just within sight to make out a form against the dark sky. It was on 2 legs. I scrunched down into my tent and stopped moving. My mind raced, trying to decide on what I saw and what I was hearing. It took me a while to convince myself, but I eventually calmed down by telling myself it was just a deer that I had caught at an awkward angle. The sounds of the thing faded away after what seemed like hours. I laid there, straining to hear any more noise. All I could hear was the sound of insects and the occasional bullfrog. I finally was able to get some sleep. I was woken after dawn. Breakfast was already made, coffee and orange juice waiting. Whatever I wanted. I stumbled out, ate my breakfast, started asking everyone if they heard anything last night. None of them had. After changing, and while the heat was still at bay, I walked over to where I had seen the creature. Numerous hoof marks littered the dirt. I followed them over to where we had found all the wood. There were clear signs something had returned to the spot. Soil had been churned up. I walked back to the campsite trying to think nothing of it. We spent the day swimming in the canal. Something in the back of my mind kept telling me whatever I saw last night was still around, watching us. That evening it was my turn to cook. I set up some burgers to cook over the fire while everyone else was going about their business. As I was about to pull the burgers off the fire, my uncle came running from the willow patch. He started saying there's some weird shit going on back in there. I put the burgers aside. We all followed him. Farther back in the willow trees there was what looked like some sort of altar. It was constructed of river stones, and on it sat a half-eaten fish and all sorts of smashed bones. Little reed-tied shapes sat around it, like voodoo dolls made from twigs. We all made our way out, talking about how creeped out we were. My dad and uncle agreed that it was probably some pagan altar or something, but it was hidden. They both agreed that would be the last night that we stayed. That night we kept the fire big until we went to bed. I kept eyeing the space between my tent and the willow patch. As I lay there, I heard the thing cross the canal again. I could hear the hooves once more. It circled to the far side of the camp. Once it got to the willow trees, I lost track of it. I strained to hear anything for a long time. I was certain the others were doing the same. Then we heard the most horrible sound erupt from the grove. It was a scream, like someone being murdered, but it had a braying quality to it. It was terrifying. I clutched my camp shovel, knowing that something was out there. I heard movement from the other tent. I saw my dad and uncle emerge. I heard my dad tell my brother to stay in the tent. They both went to the car. And I also heard my dad talking about getting their guns just in case. My father and his brother always brought pistols with them when we went camping. You never know what kind of animal or crazy person might show up. They both walked off into the dark towards the willow trees. Things were deadly silent. No insects. Nothing but a dull breeze. Then I heard 2 gunshots, followed by another horrible gargled scream. The 2 of them came running full speed back to the camp. They started yelling at us to get in the car. So my brother and I came out of the tents, and by this point my dad was practically shrieking at us, "Get in the fucking car now! Get in the fucking car!" They both had their pistols in hand and headed straight for the car. We all got in. He started it up and began hauling ass down the dirt road. He started saying they saw something back in there. My uncle was ghostly white. He told us we'll be back for our stuff later. My dad didn't stop until we reached Blythe. He got in his cell phone and called the police. The police thought my father had shot a homeless man camped out at the river. We headed back in. By the time we returned to the campsite, it was dawn. The tents were torn down, everything was tossed about. Fishing rods busted. Our camp table was in several pieces scattered about. The police searched the area, found the altar, and told us we most likely shot at some teens who were out doing their devil worshipping. There was no blood, but hoof prints everywhere again. The police told us to clean everything up and that we should probably leave. So we cleaned the site up, gathering the now mostly ruined gear. As I rolled up my tent, I felt something hit my back. I looked down to see one of the wooden figures from the altar back in the willows. I looked around in time to see something recede into the reeds, followed by splashing in the canal. I finished packing everything up, and we left. We haven't gone back since. My dad, brother, and uncle still talk about it, and we all refuse to return to the camp near Blythe ever again.